Good morning. Good morning. As the Vice Rector for International Relations at UAX, I would like to extend my warm welcome to Your Excellencies, ambassadors of Canada, Germany, India, and Japan. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I think we are going to be discussing an extremely interesting topic this morning: diplomacy, technology, and the New World Order. In an era of rapid technological development, the intersection of technology and geopolitics has become a major point of international discourse. States and non-state actors must adapt to new challenges. The emergence of disruptive technologies has brought new forms of competitiveness, but also has opened new paths for cooperation. I think it is really worth discussing. It is wonderful to be hearing the insights of the diplomatic experts, and thank you so much for sharing these and your time and your knowledge, your experience with our students at UAX. I'm sure this is going to be a very insightful session. I would also like to introduce you to our moderator this morning, Jaime Amodeo, Vice President of the Diplomatic Coalition. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Iris, and good morning to all of you. This beautiful day. It really feels like summer already, although I've heard that the temperatures are going to be dropping down a little bit again. Yes. But it is a beautiful day. Well, it is an honor to be here today. I've been to this building many times before. It used to be the offices of a corporate in Spain, and the work that the UAX has done is absolutely extraordinary. I have the opportunity of being around the building, and the way that the works have been done are really amazing. I wish I was a student at this university many years ago, because it's really a great place to learn. So today we will embark on an exploration of a critical topic at the intersection of diplomacy and technology. We do have an extraordinary pool of panelists representing 4 powerhouses with very different geopolitical landscapes, who are going to help us understand how new technologies are reshaping global interactions, influencing foreign policy, and challenging traditional diplomacy. No? I'm going to be the moderator for you today, and I hope to do a good job and not cause a diplomatic crisis. I think we have enough in the world already, very challenging times that we're living right now. So I'm going to be asking some questions to the panel, and I will at the end also open for questions to the audience. So please, as you're listening to this event, to the panelists, please think of which questions you would like to ask at the end. Okay, we want this to be interactive, not just me talking to the panel, all right? So for a start, I would like to ask each one of our distinguished panelists, of all the disruptions brought about by new technologies, which one is most central to your country's foreign policy? And we could start with Canada, for example, in order.
Good morning, everybody. I have the luck of going first, so I hope I don't preempt my colleagues too much, because I think that we'll probably agree on much of what each of us says here this morning, especially on this question about disruptions of technologies. Excuse me. Just a little bit of context. So Canada, just north of the US in North America, for those of you who are geographically challenged, I'm sure there's not many of them, and a country surrounded by 3 oceans with a land border with one country, the United States. So for many decades, for since the founding of Canada and for a very long time, we really felt that we were protected from most of the threats that the world had us facing. And of course, technology has changed that significantly. The evolving threats that we face are not just physical or even economic, they're digital and they cross borders and they affect us all. We're also, as are my colleagues here, we're a proud democracy. We have a long and rich democratic tradition and a multicultural society. And of course, a commitment to the rule of law as fundamental principles of our foreign policy. So one of the biggest challenges in this context of new technologies is disinformation and its effect on democracy and on institutions. If technology is used irresponsibly, it can have a destabilizing effect on democracies, and I think that's something we've all been seeing in recent years with foreign interference in elections, with disinformation spreading with very negative and disruptive intentions. Democracies, of course, and like in Spain, rely on citizens having access to diverse and reliable sources of information and news. And disinformation makes this access more difficult by polluting the whole information environment. And then we get into echo chambers on specific issues where there isn't a dialogue, and it all can breed mistrust. Disinformation is also a threat to peace, of course, and we're seeing it at work in the conflict in Ukraine, where Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion and his war is based on lies and deception. Russian disinformation operations have enlisted celebrities and propaganda news outlets to justify the atrocities. Russia also uses disinformation overseas to shape narratives, particularly in countries that may have a weaker information ecosystem. And they tailor the message to tap into pre-existing anti-Western or anti-colonial sentiment to build support for Russia itself, which has resulted in the rallying of misguided support in many cases for the Russian regime, both within the country and outside. We've tried to tackle that through the multilateral system. When in 2022, when Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, Canada was chairing 2 multilateral organizations that work to protect democracy, International IDEA and the Freedom Online Coalition. And in both, we focus our chairship on countering disinformation, particularly state-sponsored disinformation. We also called out other democracy-threatening practices in the digital information environment, such as internet shutdowns and content restrictions that violate international human rights. Canada is also working with other like-minded countries to strengthen our own ability to identify and counter disinformation, particularly that which threatens democracy, by interfering, for example, in our electoral campaigns. And our main instrument for this is the G7 Rapid Response Mechanism, which was established in 2018. And the Secretariat sits in Canada's Foreign Ministry, with a team monitoring the digital information environment for foreign state-sponsored disinformation, based on open source data analytics and information sharing with G7 countries and some other partners. And since 2022, there's a dedicated unit covering Eastern Europe. There's also an important role in all of this for social media platforms and for responsibility of those platforms in terms of the information that they disseminate. Doing that, restricting disinformation while respecting freedom of information is very challenging. How can it be identified quickly before it spreads? How can fact-checking help to limit the disinformation that is out there? International and multi-stakeholder dialogue on these questions is very important so that we can find solutions together. And that are guided by respect for human rights, including the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And there's lots more, but I will stop there. Thank you.
Let's move to Germany.
Thank you, Wendy. Basically, I could leave it here. No, first, Thank you all for the university to invite us, to have us here, and congratulations to your to this new institution to bring together business, tech, and international politics, because I think this is definitely very necessary that we educate people in tech who understand politics and politicians who understand tech. It's absolutely vital. The other thing first, before I want to start, actually, is to say I personally don't like the word disruptive in the way it's mostly used, because usually either it used to be a buzzword for tech industry for a while, and now it has a very negative and menacing connotation, which I think, first of all, we have to look at what we're talking about. We're talking about new technologies that are very present in our daily lives already, and we can see the tremendous advances mankind is making through these technologies also. And sometimes I think when I talk to politicians, it's all about threats. I really want to talk about what it brings, what it means for mankind, that in medicine, in agriculture, food security, just as a point. There are so many advances, and we probably only have seen a very small part of what is possible. So for me, this is, I think for our common understanding, it's very important to know, first, the technology is already there, but we only have started. I mean, AI is around for a long time, but due to all the data development in the recent 20 years, now it really becomes useful for many, many purposes. And that means also, whatever we do, no technology ever has been stopped if it has been useful. So that can't be the idea. So if we talk about AI and new technology, I think first of all we have to keep in mind we have it already, we will need it, and we should develop it, and we use it. It will be very good for mankind. I know this is sometimes not what is mostly debated. I'm totally in line with what Wendy said about the disruptive effect, the negative effects, the challenges, and we see it in Germany just as well. So it's very clear. We have been victims to tremendous attacks from Russia, also from other countries. We see the disinformation systems that are rolled over Europe. It's tremendous, and it is frightening, and it frightens people. I think what our main goal must be in developing these, and this is what my government sees very, very clearly, we want to keep it going on, and take the innovation and develop the innovation, not stop the innovation, but submit it to a responsible use. That is on national level, on EU level, and of course also on international level. So, but we know this is a technology where the national level probably is not getting so far. So we need, at least in Europe, we have made a first step to develop with the EU AI Act. We have developed the first regulation that is risk-based. It's really analyzing the different ways to use AI concerning the risks it implies. And I think this is quite sensible in the situation we are, where we don't know where we go, how to develop it. And at the same time, it's a system that tries to engage in a responsible way to use the AI without stopping new developments. I know that my chancellor was making this point very strongly. If we create regulations, which is what businesses demand, what politicians demand, what people demand, we need to make them in a way that doesn't stop development, but only usage. So I think this is a very important point. And having all kinds of these different levels of where we develop, which Wendy has mentioned. There's in the UN, there's in the G7. We're all talking about regulations, or how to find in the international order to create rules. And for us, there are some points that are very important. The first is we want to reduce disparities in AI readiness. We want the rules to be in a way that don't deepen the inequality, but on the contrary, maybe reach more equality. We will have a chance to talk about how this could be done. Because we have seen in the recent decades, we have seen that a huge technology gap. It's starting to close a bit, but I think very big in some countries, but it used to be, and it still exists. And I think the new technologies really are also an opportunity to close that gap. We need to consider, of course, security and defense. Nobody wants terrorists to be capable to use AI. It will be very difficult to stop them, but we have to make rules on that point. Defense, NATO is very much engaged also in define rules on what kind of use you can make and what kind of use you should not make of AI. And then I know it's always a point that is not so easy to discuss, particularly with some third countries, is that we do insist that it must serve human rights. It must not counteract them. We want this to be positive. That's why we need responsible actors. So this is basically the frame in which we want to work. And as Germans have a very different geographical situation, we have access to the North Sea, but basically we have 9 neighbors. And we've always, in the last centuries, been in the midst of the storm, so we have a very, very different setup. And for us, it's very, very, very important to develop, I'm not saying to create a new world order, I think to develop the existing rules-based world order into a world order that is more equal, but opens possibilities for everyone, doesn't stop from developing, but really insists on the responsible use by countries, by governments, and by individuals. And I'll leave it here.
Thank you, Ambassador. I fully agree with you in terms of how disruptive technologies not has that negative connotation, but it's really about finding that balance. I mean, technology is definitely allowing us to live a better life in many, many ways. Food security, you mentioned, there's so many things, education, so many different things, but it's true that we need to find the right balance. So it doesn't eat us, okay? So we need to protect ourselves as well. Ambassador, what's your review?
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk. I don't have any papers. I'm just going to ad-lib as I go on. The main thing I want to tell you is, when you talk about disruptive technology, what comes to your mind? Is something which disrupts, right? What disrupted in history, if you go back, when we invented the wheel, when the first automobile came, suddenly the horses became past. Of course, when I went to the Feria de Sevilla, I saw the horses again, but the automobile, when the airplane came in, when the first cell phone came, do you know how old is the iPhone, the smartphone? It was only in 2006, so you're talking about less than 20 years back. Technology is evolving rapidly. It's changing. It is not as disruptive as it was before, when societies changed because technologies changed. Today, technology just helps us become better. What are the technologies we're talking about? IoT, blockchain, 5G, computational chemistry, quantum computing. These are the new technologies which are just making things better. And in India, when we look at it, we find all technologies to be good. Because for us, in the last 75 years, we've managed to go from being an extremely poor country to something quite developed today is because of technology. Technology has helped bring a large amount of people out of the morass of poverty, exclusion, difficulties into something much better. So what technology does, it helps you leapfrog. You don't have to every time invent the wheel. You can go from basic technology to the highest technology immediately. So countries which can take advantage of technology will be the future geopolitical powerhouses. Because today, technology capability makes you a geopolitical powerhouse. Now, what is it that we look at which really going to make a difference? I mean, see, AI we all know, and we'll talk about that later on. But today, the biggest problem the world faces is what Margareta just now said, is inequality, the digital divide. We all are so used to the internet Do you know more than 50% of the world does not have access to internet? And out of the 50% who have access to internet, only 25% have access to high-speed internet. And so we are talking about a world where we talk very easily about the fact that we have this high technologies which is changing mankind, but 75% of the world still do not have access to any of these basics. School children, 2/3 of the world's school children do not have access to many of these technologies. So you're going to grow up in a world where we will have a lot of advances, but inequality will increase hugely. And this digital divide or technology gap is what we need to work on and what we have been working on for a very long time. For us, it has been to bring technology. Technology gap is not just between countries, it's within countries. Even in developed countries, there are a large number of people who do not have access to technology. Technology is changing lives, but we need to give people access because that's the only way we can make changes. So what have we been doing? I'll give you a simple example. We've put in the largest basic infrastructure of fiber optics in the world. I mean, billions of kilometers of fiber optics without, taking government money for it. It was all private driven. Our telecom cost, how much do you pay for your phone? In India, unlimited data and unlimited telephone calls cost $4 a month. What it means is even the poorest of the poor can access unlimited data. You have laptops which cost something like $200 for the latest ones. So what we have managed to do is through digital education, through bringing the cost down, by giving access, and also letting governments build up what we call the government stack. Who invented the internet? It was the Pentagon. It was a government. You name any system that you look at, the government laid the basic fundamentals of what people then use. You talk about Uber. Did Uber invent anything? Nothing. They just used GPS, payment technology to put it together. But the real inventions were done by government. Space programs that we talk of today, governments did it. So basically, governments have to lay the foundation for what technology can then be used by others. So government's basic role is to give access and to lay the foundation. So what we have laid the foundation is two things. We've got something called unique identification. Every individual. India has about 1.4 billion people. I mean, we're just going into elections. We will have 970 million people voting. So it's huge. I mean, you cannot. We need 15 million people to hold the elections, and we do it all electronically. And so, for us, the numbers are the game. They're able to give access to all these people. So for me, when we talk about technology, it's about access. Because the rest of it, we're moving. Moore's law. All of you know Moore's law. That the number of circuits on a chip will double every 2 years. We've actually gone much beyond that. For us, technology has reached so fast, the things are changing every day. And generative AI, maybe we will talk about it later on, has the ability to change the world, to make it completely different. You mark my words today. Today is 2024. 2030, if we're able to meet together, you will see a completely different world. And I hope you guys are prepared for it. Thanks.
Thank you. I was thinking actually this morning about, you mentioned the technology gap, no? That technology is not everywhere. Although for some of us, it's every day, every minute on us, it's not everywhere. Not everyone has that access to technology. And I was thinking, this project that Elon Musk has to implement a chip, in our brains, and that will give us the opportunity. In theory, the objective is at the beginning to help those that have some type of disability, Parkinson, and I was thinking, well, imagine that in a year's time, someone comes to you and say, look, I implement a chip on you. You will be able to speak the 4 languages that you speak, for example, in your countries. Or you will be able to access the internet. How much would that cost? How much would you be willing to pay for that, Some people will have that money, but imagine all those that don't. Probably the majority of the world will not have that money to pay for that. We will really create 2 types of citizens, those that have access or, to that technology and those that are not. It will really increase that gap.
I'll just tell you one thing.
Yeah.
Technology has made everything faster, better, and supposed to make it cheaper, right? But look at the 2 things which matter most to the world, education and health. right? These are two things which matter most. Technology has actually made things costlier. Yeah. Education today is much more costlier than what used to be before, and health is much more costlier than it used to be before. So if you have to really change the world, we have to make these two things cheaper with technology. That's when we really have succeeded. The rest of it is just show.
Yeah. Definitely. I was also thinking, I think we all feel that pressure that we are continuously online, that we're continuously social medias. That I remember many years ago, like 25 years ago, and disruption, as they were saying, is not new. We've been disrupted the wheel many times of many things, many inventions. No? I remember 25 years ago, I was talking to the board of my company, and I was telling them, look, I think we need to buy Blackberries. No? For those of you that don't know, BlackBerry was that a phone that had the full keyboard underneath that you could type and write emails. And I remember at that time that the board of the company said, look, but if we give a BlackBerry to people, they're going to be all day online, they're going to be answering, they're going to feel that pressure that they cannot leave the office. And I told them, look, you can turn it off. You leave the office, you turn it off. And today is the same. I mean, technology is a tool. It's a fantastic tool, but we don't have to be slaves of that tool. We can turn it off. We can turn off the TV, we can turn off our social media, we can go out for a walk without having that map, the Google map with us, Anyway, Ambassador Takahiro.
Thank you. It is very challenging to speak after these three excellent, if I may, some of the most outspoken ambassadors in the diplomatic corps in Madrid.
Wow.
But, well, it's the alphabetical order. I have to live with it. Okay. If we talk about the technologies and its relations with our diplomacy or world order, it often relates to the communication, information, automation, which implies the upgrading of communication and decision. Let's remember, when we saw the Vietnam War, we saw that on recently inaugurated color TV. Well, if I say we, I should say we are very few of us who saw that, really. And when we saw the Gulf War in 1991, it was CNN, live stream, live broadcast by CNN. Still few of us have seen that. But we all know that nowadays, the war in Ukraine, we get the information through a social network, SNS. And when we talk about the social network, that, of course, connects the people, key people who are geographically distant, and more importantly, for free. I remember that when I entered the diplomatic career, telephone communication between Tokyo and Madrid cost several hundred euros. Well, euro didn't exist at that time, but equivalent to several hundreds of euros, but it's all free. Yeah. And we have to confess that we ourselves communicate by WhatsApp. Really.
Don't tell everyone.
So that's the effect of a social network. And nowadays, 5Gs and IoTs and quantum technologies are making essential and irreversible changes to our daily life. It's true. And one of the side effects of that is that the global issues such as climate change, infectious diseases, poverty, such things are more and more visible to us, more and more closer to our daily life. It is true that the AI is a chance for us to bring our society to a better one, but it is, as it is said, it is also a risk with the cyber attacks and information manipulation, disinformations. It is so because technological advances are nowadays directly linked to national competitiveness. For example, in dual use of civilian technologies, or the confirmation biases through social networks is obstructing the formation of public opinion through correct information and sound debate. It is important to point out here that all this is happening in coincidence with a time of historical inflection. During the past 30 years, I would call it the post-Cold War era, we lived in a kind of an optimism in the sense that globalization and mutual dependence would lead us to somewhere safer and more prosperous. And this premise is not sure nowadays. We have to be more proactively, with more consciousness, try to make our own world order by ourselves in a kind of a story of invisible God, invisible hand of God in modern age is not given now. It is very true when we witness now that some countries are using economic coercions to some other countries, depending on using the dependence of those countries on that country. So the weaponization of economy is another, although it has not directly related to technology itself, but it is true that it is enhanced by technological development. Having said so, I have to emphasize here that technology itself doesn't do bad things. It is the people who try to abuse it. Mm-hmm. So now in this world, today, now the society is disrupted, not internationally and domestically, by perhaps the extremism or populism. The risk of disruption is higher. Well, I stop here.
Thank you, Ambassador. You mentioned the use of WhatsApp that you have, no? I was listening to the radio this morning, and there was this journalist in Israel, no, talking about the conflict, and she was saying that actually the Israeli government is communicating with the media through a WhatsApp group. They have a group, basically, because it's the best way of getting the message out there. No? But then I was listening to the radio this morning as well, and they were saying that there was a big leak of all the personal information of the military here in Spain and the Guardia Civil as well. So that tells us how, I mean, it's a fantastic tool, you know, the possibility of communicating instantly with others, but we are incredibly vulnerable. That we need to keep that in mind. No? We really are very vulnerable. Thank you, all of you for that answer. So I have another question for whoever wants to answer this. So new technologies are creating new needs for global governance. How is the multilateral system responding to that? What multilateral initiatives does your country specifically wish to see?
Sure, I can start. Because we love multilateralism in Canada. We're a very multilateral country.
A lot. Yeah.
I think the first thing we have to say is that we have to acknowledge that multilateralism is in crisis right now. Yeah. We have and it's not only because of this, but one of the factors is we have a veto-wielding permanent member of the UN Security Council who has violated the UN Charter in a pretty in a pretty overt way. You talked about us being 4 powerhouses here. None of us are permanent members of the Security Council, but we're all members of the G20. So, but there are calls by many countries for a new balance of power in the multilateral system, for a new way, or at least an adjusted way of addressing issues. And I think that multilateralism it can be incredibly powerful and can be a really important tool for reaching agreement and changing the way the world deals with new challenges, such as what we're seeing with technology, as well as harnessing the potential. But we have to recognize that the challenges to the multilateral system right now. And we have growing power of non-state actors. We have growing inequalities within countries, between countries, as we've already talked about. Largest number of refugees and displaced people since the Second World War at this moment. New conflicts that are emerging, it seems, every week or two. It certainly feels that way when you're immersed in the international system. So there are geopolitical shifts. We don't know where things are going. Our deputy minister likes to say that, this is an unprecedented time of change, so everybody hold on to your seats, because we don't know where we're going. We need to be able to use the multilateral system to look at these issues. And as I began, for Canada, the multilateral, as a middle power, multilateralism has always been extremely important for us, and a rules-based international system is important. We're involved in a number of initiatives that are already happening. With the Netherlands, Canada launched a global declaration on information integrity online last September with a number of countries. I think we're up to 36 countries that have adhered to that declaration. That's one example where those who do want to join together in terms of pushing an issue can do that without it necessarily being negotiated and agreed by every country. So this declaration sets a list of commitments that governments should meet to uphold information integrity online, rooted in international law. And we also believe that it's important to take a multilateral approach to technology, and that needs to be based on human rights. We need to recognize that we need to be talking not with just the usual countries that we speak with, but bringing a wide range of countries on board or working together to find those common solutions. I think the EU regulation on artificial intelligence is an example of something that can be done among like-minded. We need to be looking to broaden those kinds of agreements as well, and make sure that it's in the interests of everyone, or as many countries as possible, and including those who are technologically poor or have a lot less access to technology. And we also need it to go beyond countries, beyond nations, states, to include the private sector, to include the civil society and various actors, because everyone has a stake in this and everybody has a role to play. So new approaches to multilateralism that are multi-sectoral.
Yeah. Thank you. Who wants to? Thank you.
Oh, well, multilateralism has never succeeded.
Really worked.
We've always been behind. Multilateralism cannot succeed because it's like democracy. Everybody has to agree. And there's no way everybody is going to agree. Consensus is very difficult to achieve. As long as the multilateral system depends on everybody agreeing to the same thing, we will always be behind the curve. Technology is far ahead of us. And usually the multilateral systems become status quoist. They tend to remain frozen in time. This current multilateral system, when was it set up? 1945, right? After the Second World War. How many countries were there in 1945? 51 countries in the world. Today there are 197 countries. So 146 countries have joined the UN or the international multilateral system from 1945 till now. But the system remains the same, hasn't evolved. Which are the top 5 economies of the world today? You have US, China, and then you have 3 of us here. Germany, Japan, India at 4 trillion. And yet, like Wendy said, none of us are members of the UN Security Council. None of us are members taking decisions because the global compact that was done in 1945 does not exist today. Today the world is different. And we talked about the UN Security Council, one member holding it up, vetoing power. We've seen it happen for the last 50 years. Every member has had the bad habit of holding up global decisions by vetoing it. So if you depend on the multilateral system, it's not going to happen. But what alternative do we have? We have no alternative. We have to find a way for everybody to get together. But today, what has changed is that governments are no more the sole interlocutors for international deals. Earlier, the Westphalian model is over, literally. Today, the non-state actors, the private sector, I was talking about economy. Largest economy in the world is US at 25 trillion. Second largest is China at about 17, 18 trillion. Rest of us come at about 4 trillion each. But you know what is there? Facebook, Google, Amazon, Netflix. You put a NVIDIA. You put the net worth of these 6 companies, top 6 technology companies, 15 trillion. So you're talking about the technology companies themselves are bigger than most countries in the world. Look at the power they wield. And yet they have no say sitting down on how the world order has to be changed. So we need to work out a multilateral system which puts all these things together. How do we do it? Now, the only one which has now evolved is to a large extent the G20, because it brings together more than 90% of the world's economies, almost 90% of the world's population, and now with the addition of African Union in the last G20, today we really are truly representative in the G20. So we need to work on institutions like this, which do not have a veto power, which is more representative, and where we can work together. The UN has already started a process. There was about 4 or 5 years ago, the UN Secretary General set up a high-level group on the future of digital technologies. And they agreed last year to do a summit called the Future of the Earth Summit, which is this year, in September, October. It will be the Future of the Earth Summit, where it will be decided how technologies will work. Now, internationally, we can't get everybody to agree. So what we need to do is get them to agree on basic principles. What are the basic principles that we should be looking at, how to regulate AI or how to regulate technologies? And these basic principles can be agreed by everybody. And this is something we can work on. So the multilateral system, there's no other alternative. It hasn't worked. But if we work together, all of us, we can really solve it if we want to. But I'm very pessimistic.
Thank you. I would like to change a bit the question. So how, I mean, technology is definitely bringing a wealth of opportunities as well, no? For everyone, individuals and countries as well. So how are your countries planning on taking advantage of technology to have a better position globally, or? Up to you.
Well, thank you. Well,
Thank you.
I think I should answer to both of your questions, first and second one. Well, as for the global governance, well, let me remind you again that it is the people who has the chance of abusing the technologies. And in this world, which is more divided, there is more major risk of abuse of technologies. Sure. One example is that during the past 80 years, nearly 80 years, humankind has benefited itself a lot, enormously, from the nuclear energy. But its first use was tragic. But since then, we have been wise enough to control it, constrain the temptation of malign use of it by means of multilateral systems or various agreements. But nowadays, this is at risk due to, as we know, the the Russian president announcing the possibility of using it in its context of its war in its invasion in Ukraine. So when we talk about the threat of technologies such as AI, well, our lessons on nuclear energy might be giving something to teach us, including the importance of the public opinion in that process. Well, having said so, last year in May, the G7 leaders gathered in Hiroshima for a summit meeting, and they launched a so-called Hiroshima AI process, which is a mechanism to discuss international governance of generative AI. And in December, they agreed on a comprehensive framework, which is the first comprehensive set of rules on AI to be followed by all parties concerned, well, which is never complete. It is something to be developed. On the other hand, in November, in UK, there was an AI safety summit to discuss the cooperation in security assessment. So such kind of a continuous discussion and effort and involving and I agree with the Canadian ambassador on the importance of multi-sectoral approach and involving various stakeholders and involving these opinions is very important. And in that context, what is important is we have to stick to the most basic principles that we share, not the values that belongs to a certain camp of the global society, which is, so to say, the human dignity or rule of law, something that we have developed for decades and centuries among all the 197 countries. And, well, having said so, I think I have to make some reservations on your second question, because how we can take advantage of new technologies to strengthen its global positioning. It's not about taking the technologies for its own benefit. It is because technological advances are directly linked to national competitions, and this must not be emphasized nowadays. Rather, the emphasis has to be put on the coordination, cooperation, rather than disruption, division, and confrontation. And how we have to discuss how we should restrain ourselves from the abuse of technologies. This is the main point. We should not abuse the technologies or abuse the advantage of technologies for the national primacy. Yeah. This is a point that I had to make. And on the other hand, active use of science and technology is indispensable to overcome the global challenges common to all humankind. We have many problems that we have to solve, not only by one single country, but with the cooperation of many countries. And our technologies will be very much useful. We know that. Well, having said so, a bit of publication is that next year we are hosting the Expo 2025, Osaka, Kansai. The main theme of the Expo is the Society 5.0. 5.0 is a concept of the new stage of the human development coming from the hunting society, agricultural, industrial information, and then 5.0 implies highly integrated system of cyberspace and physical space. So, well, first thing that I would like to say is please visit the Expo next year. starts in April next year, so please visit Japan and visit the expo. And another thing that when we talk about diplomacy, the technology, communication technology is influencing us, of course, which in the sense that we are now poised to communicate directly with the public opinion, which was not very much the case.
Yeah.
So by social networks, we are daily communicating, and in both ways with the public opinion. It is more true, more important in a democracy where the agreement between governments is not sufficient. We have to convince the public opinion of our partner countries to make the agreement work. So that is our commitment with the public opinion is very much important. Having said so, I have an account in Instagram and X. It's Embajador JPNESP. Please follow me.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to attend the expo. Definitely, I'm sure it will be amazing, no? And I fully agree with you what you're saying in terms of using technology not only for the benefit of one country but for everyone. Of course, we really wish, I think, everyone that was the case, but it's not always the case, and we know that. Ambassador Gosse, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just I think my Japanese colleague has made a very, very important point.
Yeah.
You asked about the benefits, but or for our own countries. I think this is exactly the problem we have in the last couple of years. We have seen a rise in an attitude that says my nation first from different systems, from different countries, and that has slowed down globalization, the positive points of globalization, that is free flow of knowledge, free flow of know-how. And that for me is indeed the bigger risk, not the technology, but the way it is used to promote very, very egotist, very nationalist objectives, and that hinders us to build, what my Indian colleague has said, somehow a common ground for a new kind of order, however we call it, a rules-based order, but I think everybody looks at that. It has to be rules-based, there is no alternative. Absolutely. But as long as the main rule is my country first, my system first, me first, we will have a very difficult time to create that. Just as an addition to my colleagues.
And also, as you were mentioning, I mean, the number of countries in the world has more than tripled. I mean, so that becomes even more difficult, to reach that agreement on a multilateral basis.
And you know where we end up
impossible.
When everyone thinks my country or my thing first.
Yeah.
You know where we end up. We see some
first.
of those things right now already.
But just on the future of technology, the two things I wanted to say. One is technology evolves as we go along. Some of the technology in the past, which we thought was wonderful for the world, has turned out to be terrible. I mean, let me give an example. Plastics. When plastic was first discovered, everybody was so happy. Plastics changed the world.
Fantastic.
And today, plastics is the biggest danger to the world. Or refrigeration. When we started getting refrigerators and air conditionings, we used a chemical called Freon. It changed the world, but today we are having to ban Freon. We have to have different elements because those have changed the world. So technology, we don't know what is going to be good for the future, what is not going to be good for the future. But the one thing which is going to really change the world is generative AI. AI has been there for a long time, AI and machine learning. But generative AI is going to change the world. Like I told you, 6 years from now, if we meet in 2030, the world will be a different place. And I'll give you examples. The 3 things that my colleagues said which are important for the world: food security, health, and education. You look at it, how generative AI is changing. Just pharmaceuticals, health. You know, it takes about 10 years to identify a new molecule for a new medicine. So if you have to treat any disease, It almost takes 10 years, the whole process of identifying the millions of molecules, their combination, what works, what doesn't work. With generative AI, we can bring it down to less than a year, from 10 years to 1 year. So you're talking about in the next 5 years, really finding cures to some of the most deadly diseases that are there in the world, to be able to find changes to a huge amount of things that we cannot even talk about today. Food, from 3D printing to computational chemistry. Computational chemistry will change the way. We'll start growing hair on our head for those who haven't had it. You can make a world of a difference. So for me, if there is one technology all of us need to work together, it's on generative AI. Because generative AI can have a good effect as well as a bad effect. It's like nuclear energy. Like my colleague said, when nuclear energy was bought, it was the cleanest form of energy in the world and the most powerful form of energy. But people misused it for different reasons, and now because of that, we are not using it as much as we should. Same with generative AI. This year, 2024, more than 60% of the world's population are going to the polls. Elections are there in everywhere, from US to India to UK to you name it, elections everywhere. This year is a year of elections, the maximum number of people. And generative AI is being used to do deepfakes, fraud, disinformation, anything you like. We will see this year how badly generative AI can be used. But we need to focus on the good parts of it. And if any country has to focus on anything, it's generative AI.
Thank you. I would like now to move to the audience. Okay, we have a fantastic, well, full house today here of students, many of them in business, in international relations. I'm sure you have a lot of questions from our ambassadors. We don't have too much time, but I think a couple of questions for you. So, who wants to go first? Do you have a microphone? Thank you. Thank you so much.
So first of all, thank you for your presentation. So I wanted to ask you, do you believe that new technologies could break international relationships in terms of diplomacy?
I'm going to give the answer that our Japanese colleague already gave, which is it's not the technologies, it's how people use them that can break international relations, I would say.
Yeah.
Though if you can find a technology to change human behavior, probably will change. But as long as humans react the way they do, it's not the technology, but the human behind the technology which is most important.
Yeah, that will really be a disruption if we change the way we think and we can act.
I mean, your Elon Musk idea of putting a chip.
Yeah, that may help. Do you have a question? Where's the microphone? Okay, go ahead.
The Canadian ambassador talked about disinformation, especially in the modern world. My question is, what role do you all think that disinformation and misinformation played in the rise of extremist political movements, especially in Europe and Canada and the US?
Someone else?
Whoops.
I mean, I think it has played an important role. I mean, luckily in Canada, the extreme right has not gained force, but we have a very close view of what's happening in the U.S., for example, where, you know, talk about fake news, talk about, I mean, there are, and in other countries as well, politicians can just repeat things until I think they themselves can be convinced they're true, or they've definitely convinced others. If you just repeat things often enough, they become a kind of ground truth, and especially when they're propagated on social media where there is no fact-checking necessarily or critical look at it. So I think disinformation has played a role in that. It's been used by those who want to change the conversation to move in their favor, and one of the ways that we can combat that is through education and through ensuring that people look at information critically and check their sources.
You had another question, no? Do we have a microphone, please?
I have another question.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Wait, let me formulate it. Next question is that I come from a country that has been sanctioned by both Canada and the European Union. My question is, how do you think that sanctions in the world work in the area of diplomacy? Do they really work?
Someone, be brave, come on. Germany.
I mean, I think the question is, what are the alternatives?
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, there are very different kinds of sanctions. I think there's also a process we've learned. We're doing a lot more of personalized sanctions that deal with a certain, also with persons, not only very broad sanctions. They're all different kinds. It's difficult to predict whether they really work in a special way or in the way you expect them to. But what would be the alternative? Either do nothing, send tanks? Not really. So the EU, particularly, I can only speak for Germany, but also within the EU, well, we are dedicated to peaceful solutions, and we don't want to send tanks if possible. So that's the question about sanctions. We know that they're limited, and we also know in the EU they not only have created the effect, not always create the effect we want to see, but they also have created a huge bureaucracy on how to administrate the sanctions. It's really, it's quite intense. Nevertheless, I don't, right now, the instruments the EU has, being democratic, being dedicated to international order, being dedicated to rule of law and are limited in that sense.
See, sanctions can only be given by a country which has the power to give sanctions.
Yes.
So if Rwanda has a problem tomorrow, it cannot sanction anybody. Or if Kenya or Nigeria has a problem, they can't sanction anybody. It has to be a powerful countries or a group of powerful countries which can sanction others. But I completely agree with what my colleague said. There is no alternative to sanctions because the only alternative to sanction is to go to war. And so the sanctions are a better way of going to war than having an open war. But sanctions disrupt the global economic order. So what we're looking at deglobalization is because of this sanctions regime. So sometimes we have to, it's like nuclear weapons. Why do we have nuclear weapons in the world? We don't need nuclear weapons. But people keep it because they think it makes them safe. It's like guns in the US. I mean, people keep it because, so sanctions are a necessary evil. You can't, if you take it out, the alternatives are bad. Sometimes it's good for the country being sanctioned. I'll give you an example of India. We were sanctioned for nuclear and for space program. And today we are the world's leading nuclear and space program because we are sanctioned, we developed it ourselves. And so sometimes it can work out well, but there is nothing good and nothing bad about it. It's another tool you have, and you have to use it because the alternative is worse. It's like democracy. It's the worst system in the world, but there is no other better system. So that's.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left.
Well, Japan has also imposed a very strict economic sanction to Russia since its invasion in Ukraine. And, well, it is costly. It costs Japan itself. Imposing economic sanction is not unilateral, it's mutual. But, and we know that we shouldn't take it for granted that economic sanction alone cannot stop the other country from doing something. No, it's not definite measures to deter an action of a country, or a target country. But it is true that it raises the cost. We are raising the cost of Russian invasion to Ukraine. And this is only a part of our effort against Russian invasion to Ukraine, for example.
Thank you. You had another question?
I'm Professor George Iran here at the University Alfonso Sabio. I teach international relations, diplomatic practice, and human rights. Throughout this whole round table, and also want to thank my colleague here in front, Veronique, she's the one who who is the godmother of this whole story here. Anyway, of course.
So it's all your fault.
Anyway, just briefly, I was looking at the title of the session. I think we brought to mind a famous book by, I think, Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. Folks, this is where we are at now.
Yeah.
I talk as an educator. I've been teaching for 30 years, folks, in the United States, Spain, Italy, Lebanon, other places, and I'm here, I'm in Spain. Basically, folks, where is the human in this whole story, number one? And this recently, the Vatican had a round table, they published a book about it, regarding the impact of AI, and there's a word that was not pronounced here tonight, ChatGPT. My friends, when I ask my students to write papers, where do they go? They go to ChatGPT, they have accounts, or Google, and so on and so on. So it's copy-paste. Remember my time when I was at the University of Southern California, we had to go spend time in the library at USC in Los Angeles. They had a school of international relations. We used to go there. I remember there was a mouse that used to roam around the library because the colleagues from Saudi and other places used to bring the sandwiches to the library, so we called the mouse Kissinger, another fellow in the whole story. But basically, folks, this is the deal, that today we have Teams, Zooms, Zoomet, whatever it is. Basically, where is the human? How do you interact? I miss the days where we can interact directly, student and teacher. That's very important. Two, I think technology today has become a privilege of the rich, while the poor don't have that privilege, folks. Also, it is a privilege of the strong and powerful on this planet, folks. Okay, how do you change the system? I don't know. Yeah, bring countries like Brazil, we forgot Brazil in this whole story, India, Japan, all due respect to the Europeans, and Canada, of course. But basically, there are other countries that have their different perspectives. South Africa, folks, a very important country today, okay? But what I want to do is bring back the education, this whole story. What do you mean by that? Where do we go from here? And basically, today, when I get a paper from my student, or one of my students, I say, is this ChatGPT or is this your work? So I have to challenge them and ask them questions about it, and so thank you.
All right.
Can I just say something on this? Because this is something my daughters, I mean, I have two daughters. You know, this young generation is far better than what we were. We can reminisce about our past, but the young generation, especially the Gen Z, born out after 2000, far more open, liberal, advanced, a better generation than what we were. I have a great optimism for the future, great hope for the future, because these kids will change the world. We are reminiscing about a world where we grew up in, where there's interaction. There is interaction, but the interaction is different. When first time television came in, first time the telephone came in, we always demonized it, saying this is going to change. People are going to watch television, not go out and play. You know, everything. We demonized every new technology, and we're demonizing it again today. I don't think so that is going to happen. These kids will grow up to be far better. They're much more open. You know, there's this issue of, I'll tell you something else. I'm sorry I'm taking this time, but I feel very happy. You know, this transgender issue. A lot of my friends and colleagues tell us, what is the stupidity that's happening across the world? And I tell them this is the best thing that the youngsters are bringing. Because once you think of gender as being fluid, you don't stereotype genders anymore. You don't say men have to be like this, women have to be like this. What we stereotyped all our life. Young generation is no more stereotyping anything. Everything is fluid. And so the world will become a much better place with such fluidity. It's not just gender, it is color, it is race, it is everything. If everything becomes fluid, we will live in a better world in the future than we did. Ours was a very siloed world. The haves, have-nots, the blacks, the whites, the colors, the religion, the caste, everything. It's a much better world now. So all of you, I'm very optimistic. I hope you are as optimistic as me, but I am really.
You have another question? We only, oh, okay. All right. I think we need to drive, I think, the event to a close, no? I think yeah. So, well, thank you very much. I think it's been an amazing discussion. No?
Thank you very much. I have the honor to have a 1 minute for closing remarks. I think this has been extremely interesting and helpful, insightful, and definitely food for thought. I think there are so many important issues that have come up during the conversation. I have just taken notes on a few things, right, that I would like to leave up in the air. Well, first of all, something as basic as the ideal to converge in a set of agreements. I think that's what multilateralism is about. Is it really a useful approach? The fact that the system's not ideal, does it make it invalid? Anyway, is there any other better system? Like, as you mentioned, same thing with democracy. Regarding well, technology, I think there's one thing that has been said that's critical. Focus on ethical technology. So technology itself is not a problem, or should not be a problem, is the way we make use of it. And having ethical considerations, having a human-centered approach, the ideal of thinking on the benefit of all, not only of yourself, of your interest, that makes the whole difference. Second, ensure equitable access. That is also so important. Like, we cannot think of a world even more divided because of the access to technology or not. We have to strive, we have to close the bridge gap and ensure equitable access to technology and education, healthcare, and information. Third, a set of comprehensive rules should be agreed. Like, can we all have a set of rules that regulate the use, like a fair use of technology? Second, technology is so useful, it's such a powerful tool. It can, as it has been said, foster global health resilience, right? And also contribute to conflict resolution if it's done and used in a good way. It aids early conflict detention. It can help actually ensure their resolutions. Finally, it can actually both enhance and also, hinder democracy. So it's all a matter of how we use it and how we educate young generations to use it, right? My overall idea is develop a human-centered AI and technology approach. Thank you so much, everyone.